Story 1. Foreign, I hope you're ready for this. I'm always looking to hear your experiences, so if you have a story you'd like me to read in an upcoming video, please send it to the email in the description. Now on to the stories. Last night my husband woke me up at around 11:50 to tell me that someone's been knocking on our door and ringing our apartment doorbell for about 10 minutes on and off. He woke me up so I could possibly ID the person. Once I looked out our upstairs apartment window, I saw the man walking to his car. In our apartment parking lot, he was wearing blue jeans and a gray t-shirt. He was a medium build, possibly a 30-year-old blonde man. He wasn't covering his face or anything. But the thing is, he was carrying what looked like resistance bands or rope. He sat in his car for around 3 minutes while I was on the phone with dispatch. Then he came back to our door and knocked hard for another few minutes. Dispatch advised me that the police were on their way and they hung her. I started videoing the vehicle. I read out the tag number and making model and just watched as he put his car in park in reverse over and over again. Out of seemingly nowhere, he backed out of the parking lot and started rushing away. But not before the officer arrived and pulled him over. My downstairs neighbor knocked on my door and told me that he'd been peering into her little children's window and was pounding on her door as well. She said that her husband had left only 1 minute before he started knocking at her door. She said he saw her children through the window and that's why he continued knocking. Our doors are right next to one another, so he probably didn't know what door he wanted opened. He was watching us as well through our upstairs window, so I turned all of the lights out and shut the blinds while I called dispatch, and the police never contacted us for a statement. I've reached out to dispatch about an update and I'm waiting to see if any action was taken. We are keeping our eyes peeled to see if he's been following us. I'm replacing my porch light bulbs with motion detectors and putting bars in our windows and door tracks. My neighbors and our families are panicked to say the least. He was outside for about 25 to 30 minutes while I was looking at the video I took. I remember that car. I was walking my dog at 8 p.m. a week ago for him to go to the bathroom, and this car was driving really slow through the parking lot and parked a few spots down from where I was letting my dog snap. They just sat there with the car running. When I tell you, my ears started ringing. And I got an awful feeling. I'm not joking. I turned around and went home. I didn't give my dog the chance to go to the bathroom. I shut every door and window. I think this man has been stalking our apartment building, me and my neighbors. I think he wanted to get into where those children are. To the knocking man with bad intentions, let's not meet. Thank you. Story 2. Okay, so this happened a long time ago, but it's still just so vivid in my mind. And I want to share it. My primary school did prompts for the seniors, the classes who are going into high school next year, got to dress up all fancy, and some of us, including my friend group, rented limos to drive us around for a while before the prom actually started, and the younger years got to participate as well, but in more casual stuff. The prom ended at around 10 p.m.-ish, so I went outside to go home, and my sister is there to pick me up. Now, this was the first time I've ever worn heels in my life, and my feet were killing me, so I wanted to hop in a taxi and go home instead of walking for an extra 15 to 20 minutes, but my sister had brought our dog with her, so we had to walk back. I decided to walk ahead because I wanted to get home quickly so I could just collapse under my bed and take off the heels. To get to my house, you could either go down the main road or go down the side roads. It takes roughly the same amount of time, so because I felt like I was going to collapse, I didn't want that to happen on the main road. I went down the side roads. Okay, now on to the actual creepy thing. The road has 2 rows of houses on either side. One house has a bright red car in front of it. As I'm walking down the road, about a few feet away from the red car, a guy with thinning dark hair and thin round glasses comes out of his house and goes over to his car and just stands behind it. Now I'm right in front of the car on the path. He's staring right at me and opens the trunk, looks down, and as I'm walking past him, he smiles at me and whispers right by my ear, "It's empty." I then speed walk down the rest of the street. When I'm a good ways away from him, I turn around and he still stood there, trunk open, staring and smiling at me. I now get chills every time I see a red car parked or go past me, and hate it every time I went up or down that road. Story 3. Okay, so my fiancé and I were the local pancake house today for lunch. Everything was normal as usual. We were greeted, had a seat in order. We'd been here once before about a week ago. Our waitress was kind of rude and dismissive to me and seemed extremely interested in my fiancée. I didn't think anything of it at first. Because my fiancée is really likable and sweet, she gets along with everyone we meet. Anyway, she came over with our order and made a comment to my fiancé about her hat, a black baseball cap with a fish hook on the brim, about how she knew it was her from her hat. We laughed it off, but once she walked away, my fiancée was like she must have noticed me last time, and I shook my head. No, we've only ever been to this restaurant once, and that woman wasn't here, nor did you wear that hat. We boxed up our food before my fiancée went out to the car while I paid. As the cashier was entering my order into the register, she looked confused. She asked me, "Who's Erica?" I shrugged. She said that they didn't have anyone named Erica that worked there, and asked who my server was. I told her the woman with the blonde ponytail. She looked confused and concerned before walking off to ask another employee. They agreed they had no with that description or name that worked there. I looked around the small restaurant to point around. You could literally see the entire restaurant from the front, including the kitchen and restroom, but they couldn't find her. I paid and walked out to our car and filled my fiancée in on what had just transpired. Sheila concerned and said that the creepy van we parked next to left before I got out there. Now we're safe at home. But I'm still a little worried as to who that woman was, why she was so interested in my fiancé. Story 4. This happened 15 years ago when I just come home from college on winter break. Home this time was not the house I grew up in. My parents had just moved closer to our small city, so it just didn't feel the same to be in a different space. Maybe that's what triggered my worry. In my family, I'm always the one thinking of worst-case scenarios. Generally distrustful and mostly seeming like the annoying worrywart. Call it what you will, but it's also the gift of fear, am I right? One cold night, my parents had gone to bed upstairs and the dog had followed suit. I thought I'd watch TV in the living room for a bit before going to sleep and settled in on the couch. The living room was in the front of the house, and with the recent move the shutters on the window weren't there at the time, only see-through curtains that weren't really drawn. I noted this, but was used to what rural setting when the only ones who could see in were the neighbors we knew so well. I'm watching TV for about half an hour when the screen cuts out. It just goes snowy. This was back in the days when you watched whatever your local cable channels brought to you. I looked up from whatever I was doing at first, thinking, well, that sucks. That something felt off. I tried the remote, but no other channels worked, and so I was sitting there thinking about what I should do instead, when my cat jumps up onto the windowsill and starts wailing. This may seem innocuous, but anyone who knew my cat knew this was not par for the course. He was pacing and wailing at the window. A feeling of dread washed through me, and I was frozen. That feeling of dread is so fiercely visceral. What the hell is going on? What's out there? I tried to settle myself down in this unfamiliar dark house and felt a bit better, because what are the chances? But there it was. I swear on all I have that this cold water there blew through, and then I heard the side door, and I became unfrozen. I bolted. I run upstairs to wake my parents in slumbering dog and frantically tell them that someone is trying to get in the house. They, I think, were annoyed. I'm a warrior, remember. Still may get up and I think try to placate me by looking around the house. They go check all the rooms, including the basement, while I'm scared and exasperated. They are sleepily roaming about into dark rooms unarmed when God knows who is probably made it inside already. Well, they didn't find anything. They verbally patted me on the head and said good night, and I felt foolish. That is, until the next morning. I don't know what prompted my parents to call the police, but they showed up and asked me how I knew someone was out there. Whoa, hold up. What? I start answering. Well, the cat was meowing a lot on the windowsill and my voice trailed off, waiting for the reaction I usually get, which I got. The cops. Marks the cat, huh? He goes on to say that someone cut the cable wires on the side of the house, that either the person or persons thought they were disarming the alarm, or they saw me watching TV and wanted to mess with me, and the side door muddy grounds gave us the ability to see the fresh tracks right up to it. It didn't look like it had been fooled where, but I know what I heard. Whatever it was, I knew it, and I said to my parents, let me. Triumphant feeling was short-lived when I started to mow. What I was so sure about had been true. I didn't know someone was out there. I also knew I would always check that side door and take some cues from the cat just to be safe. Story 5. This past summer I started hearing a voice whenever I went into the bathroom. It seemed to be coming from the flat upstairs. At first I thought it was just one of the owners of the place talking from his room, since the layout has the main bedroom next to the bathroom and the walls are so thin sound easily goes through them. I thought nothing of it. Plus the voice was accompanied by a new creaking sound as if they were laying on an old bed, so perhaps he was bedridden and that's why I heard him all the time. But one day I started to worry getting out from the shower. I could swear a few of the words I managed to understand seemed directed to my body, but there were so few that I thought I was just being paranoid. Say I wasn't comfortable when I first moved into the house. The second I set foot in I was worried about being spied on. I have no clue why there was no reason to think so, but I remembered a movie about someone moving into a house with cameras and I started to worry. I even jumped right out of bed one night a few years ago because I'd seen a camera at the end of a cable hanging a few centimeters from my face. It took a while to realize it had been a dream, so I just thought it was my mind being The voice kept coming through the bathroom's roof all through summer, and looking up, all I could see was the hole that had been opened right above the toilet to get to a leaking pipe. I had been there for a while, not wanting to waste money on closing it down until I knew for sure the leakage had been patched properly, since it wasn't the first time I've had issues with that. All you can see in that hole is brick and cement, a beam and the big pipe taking waste out of the building, and darkness up above where the light can't reach. Nothing weird in there, so I was never uneasy to leave it open for a while longer, up until a month or so ago when I was going to the bathroom under the familiar sound of that voice and creak. I was fairly backed up and it got worse during the summer, so I was having trouble and I whispered to myself, damn it, to which I immediately heard what felt like a reply, a single word from that all familiar voice, push. I looked up in a panic at the hole above me with the exposed pie, wondering if someone had been looking at me this whole time. I didn't see anything, but the voice stopped, the creaking stopped, everything was quiet. I went to investigate later, phone in hand, but there was nothing there. I used my phone's camera to try to see if a lens gleamed back, but it was all the same as it had always been. Any time I investigated to look for water, I started wondering if there might have been a hole just big enough that someone could fit an endoscopic camera through without arousing suspicion, something that could be slipped in and out. There hasn't been a voice or creaking since, and it stopped in that instant, and I haven't heard it since a month later. Sometimes I wonder if I didn't hallucinate the whole thing. I never had any in my life, but it was all so strange. My upstairs neighbors are a bunch of parasitic pieces of understar that have tortured me with constant water leaks, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if they're also a bunch of creepy fox. For in around 2001, when I was 21 or so, I was a Story 6 college student living at home. My house was on a quiet downtown street in a college town. I'm not a sleepwalker per se, but sometimes when I'm really tired it takes me a few minutes to really wake up. Within those first few minutes, I'll often go about my business. Almost by habit, I've gone to the bathroom, brushed my teeth and that kind of thing before falling. Waking up one afternoon, I was home alone and taking a nap on the living room couch. My doorbell rang. It felt like part of my dream, and the next thing I knew I was standing in the front vestibule talking to a strange young man. I have no memory of getting up and answering the door. He was your late teens or early 20s, clean cut and dressed normally. Nothing stood out about him. He was holding a stack of something. He was in the process of explaining to me that he was part of some rehab program that took minority low-key offenders from troubled backgrounds and helped them rehab by teaching them life skills. He and the others were out that day selling magazine subscriptions for their non-profit. At first, I told him I wasn't interested, but he was friendly and wouldn't back down. He was polite but pushy. I finally told him I'd look while thumbing through the catalog, though I became aware of him moving closer and closer to me. All the hair stood up on my neck. He was really crowding me and invading my personal space. I didn't want to be rude, so I just shuffled backwards towards my door until the knob was pressed into my back. What made me really uncomfortable, though, was what he was saying to me. He kept going on about, "This is a really nice house, how can I get me a nice house like this?" Finally, to get him to leave, I wrote him a check for a subscription service. Just as I was starting to close the door on him, he put up his hand and asked for a glass of water. All of my antennas went up at that. I knew not to let him into the house, but He moved forward to where we were almost touching. His hand was on my door frame, blocking me from leaving. The best of you, I could only move backwards. When he asked me a second time, I said sure, and then before he could react I said, "Be right back," as I quickly backed in, shut the door in his face, and set the deadbolt. Watching from a window where my heart and cars ball up my check and then walk away, he got into a dark sedan that was parked half a block down my street and driven by another young man. Despite how he was supposedly going from door to door, none of my neighbors were approached. My check was never cashed, and I never got my Cosmo. I was afraid that I may have totally overreacted, but at the time I didn't feel comfortable at all. My upbringing was totally fighting my instincts. Since then I've learned enough to know that I might have been really lucky. Story 7. I know this story may sound fictional. A lot of people don't believe me when I tell it, but I can assure you that the other person involved also witnessed what occurred that strange night. This happened 11 years ago with an ex-girlfriend. It actually changed our relationship for the worse, and we ended up breaking up a few weeks after. Nonetheless, I still remember this like it was yesterday due to how unexplainable it was. My girlfriend at the time wanted to surprise me with what she said was an overnight surprise trip. I obliged and felt like I was a pretty lucky guy for her to do something that required that much planning. After packing a duffel bag full of clothes and toiletries, we left for what I thought was a resort or some kind of hotel stay. 2.5 hours passed when we pulled off of a main road and headed down an off-road path. I asked her if this was a camping trip, and she replied yes. To be honest, I was disappointed, as I didn't really like camping, and not to mention I wish I knew to pack my hiking shoes. I didn't complain, of course, because it was still the romantic gesture. 15 minutes on this rough road, we finally pulled into a campground. The first thing I noticed was that there really wasn't anyone around us. It made sense though, this was really far off the beaten path. I was actually surprised her car made it out that far considering how harsh the road was. Anyway, we make a fire pit and she cooks dinner. Everything's going just fine and we are really feeling each other. We of course take it to the tent as the sun goes down and we're vibing off each other. Yeah, and it's what you would expect would happen as we begin moving things along as a young college-age kids do. This is where the first strange occurrence happens. I hear scratching noises on the side of the tent. I try to remember if we set the tent up next to a bush, maybe the wind is causing branches to rustle against the tent. Oh wow, that's the words. Maybe it's a bird or something else. It stops rustling and we continue chilling as if nothing happened. Then things escalate in a strange manner. It's like the wind stopped and the environment became silent. We both felt uneasy, causing us to get sort of knocked out of our playful mood. She laid next to me as we tried to concentrate on listening to hear if there was a bear or some other animal in the area. Then it happened in an instant. Something akin to an explosion hit the tent tremendously hard. I could compare it to, say, if a log was thrown like a battering ram against the side of the tent. I say this because it literally pushed the material in forcefully and felt dangerous. A surge of adrenaline lit through my body as I felt like something violent was outside the tent. I never knew if I was a flight or fight guy, but I guess my next action gives me some idea. I yell aloud, "Give me the knife and the flashlight," as I scramble up and unzip the tent with tools in hand. My first thought was that I was going to confront some psycho that was messing with us, perhaps with a baseball bat or some kind of battering weapon. I kid you not, I launched myself out of that tent and stood up in a flurry to confront my attacker. A few breaths pass as a cold feeling sets in. I do a 360 scan to nothing but silence and darkness. Maybe it was a branch that fell on the tent. No, there was absolutely nothing on the ground where the thought was heard and felt. Hello, and I yelled again and again to no response until only a moment later in the silence a chill shot up my spine. "Get the keys and get out of the tent," I said in a frantic tone as my girlfriend listened and now joined me. I looked at a car that we arrived in and noticed it was about 30 yards out by the shoddy off-road path. She didn't even need to know what I was thinking as we both just started to speed walk towards it. You might be thinking at this point that I'm overreacting, but truly I cannot describe the terror that washed over me when I looked out in the darkness. After investigating the tent, I could feel like something was watching me, and to top it off, it was eerily silent. I know she confirmed my suspicions when she started for the car immediately. Without question, our instincts were telling us to get the hell out of there. The walk to the car was unnerving and felt like a football field away, but finally we got into the car with keys in hand. I took the driver's seat after turning the keys led to some relief as the engine started. Instinctively, I locked the doors and turned the headlights on. We sat for about 3 seconds trying to rationalize what was happening when my girlfriend started exclaiming, "My laptop is moving, something is in the tent." She said this because she brought her laptop to serve as a lantern after dark. We of course left it in a hurry as well as other items. I saw what she saw. It was items being rustled around 30 yards away. Without further hesitation, I put the car in gear and started down the rough road as I tried to calmly drive the car down the dirt path quickly but carefully. The strangest thing happened next. Out loud, piercing, ringing noise rang from inside the car's cabin. I turned the radio on and off. I checked the windows. I asked my girlfriend if a car had ever made such noises, and she replied no. I asked her again if she could hear it, as maybe it was just me being under stress, and she said yes, I hear it. I don't know what that is, and the confused, panicked tone. Now, I wanted to write this off as a car problem, but if you were there with me, you would describe it as some kind of bell continuously ringing. It didn't sound like any car noise I'd ever heard. My next instinct, as I grew up as a pastor's kid, I just remember praying for 10 minutes as I was convinced it was a supernatural or demonic event. We endured the screech for 10 grueling minutes. As to my relief, it ended suddenly. It didn't fade out or go quiet. The loud ring literally stopped in an instant. I can't describe that feeling in that car when it stopped, and it's so strange to look back and remember that I felt internally that the ordeal was over. Once the ringing stopped, everything felt normal again. The panic and the chills, all of that went away in an incident. We ended up down the road another 45 minutes and finally stopped at a trucker diner. We slept in the parking lot. Or at least she did. I was still on edge from the adrenaline dump I just went through in attempted bravery. The next day we went back to the campsite as the sun was up. We investigated but saw no tracks or anything except for the contents of the tent tossed around but still accounted for. I was hoping they were missing so I could write it off as people scrolling with us and then plundering our tent, but that didn't seem to be the case. We were packed up and gone in less than 10 minutes as the area still felt weird. I haven't been camping since. I would go again, but the next time I want an RV or at least a relatively known location with others around. This place was the remote mountains of Pace in Arizona, far from civilization. Story 8. I'll do my best to describe this or make sense, but it all started with my evening routine of going to lock my front door of my 1-bedroom apartment. So to make an image in your head, my front door is at the front of the block, and if you look to the left while locking the front door, you can't see out until the car park at sort of eye level, which next to it has a bench and a street light. So a few months ago when I started locking the front door, which I always do, but it's like clockwork at 10 p.m. as I have work early, so nearly on the dot every night I will go to my front door and lock it and place the latch on. However, a few months back when locking the front door, I noticed someone just sitting on the bench in the car park next to the street lamp, which I thought nothing of, and for the next, I'd like to say, 2 weeks or so, every night I went to lock the door, I would glance to my left and see this woman sitting on the bench. However, one evening I looked to the left, and this woman was just standing next to the bench and just waved at me, and in pure shock and being scared, I guess I just dropped to the floor and locked the door from the ground. I was too scared to look, so I crawled to the bedroom and went to bed. The very next evening, I was rather apprehensive to look out the window, so as I approached my front door to lock it the very next evening, I kind of slowly peeked my head around to see if this woman was still there, but nothing. And there was nothing for the next 4 days, and then the most chilling experience of my life happened. So it was a Sunday evening, and I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about this. I went to lock my door at 10 p.m. like every evening, and not really thinking about it, I locked the front door and looked to my left, and I absolutely jumped out of my skin. The woman's face was pushed up against my window and smiling directly at me. And pure shock, I screamed and banged the window, which he briefly moved away and then waved at me. He then just walked off. So naturally I went to bed that night scared to death. Since that day I haven't seen the lady again, and this happened about 4 months ago now. I wonder if this happened because of karma. I went to a popular cafe in Tiergarten. Story 9. And left in a huff after being ignored and dismissed for an hour with a hungry almost 2-year-old, while a couple who arrived after me were served wine lunch. And dessert I just upped and left without canceling my cake and coffee. A few minutes later I'm pushing the pram through the busy gardens. A man rides up alongside me and starts a conversation. "Hi, what a cute baby." "Why, thanks," I respond. "Where are you from?" he asks. "Sydney." You pulls the bike in front of me, stops, and gets off. "Excuse me, I have a question," he says to me. "Yeah," I say, smiling. He produces a knife and says, "Money." When I say produces, he stands in front of my son and gestures at him about 50 centimeters away from him. "No," I tell him. The man steps forward now about 30 centimeters from my son and moves the knife towards my son's stomach. For some bizarre reason I feel kind of safe because I have the prime as a barrier between him and me, but my son is definitely not. There is no one within 500 meters despite being 4 p.m. on a Friday. For a bit of context, I work in a trauma hospital and treat stab victims. I instantly flash back to the 21 paraplegic who was intervening to stop a woman being harassed and was stabbed in the back, the 30-year-old with a permanent stomach. Back to go to the bathroom in after a similar incident. My mind says, give him the money. Oh, how much have I got? Probably not enough. If I turn to get my backpack, he might stab my son, and so I'm thinking this. My mouth takes over and I start screaming the most vile abuse to ever come out of my mouth. How do you who does that to a mother and child? He gets on his bike and rides away. I still screaming, grab the prime and run after him. It was the adrenaline talking to the police later. They say they have 6 bikes in the park at all times trying to catch the gang who normally attack in groups of 2. Obviously, I was such a vulnerable target, they thought one would be fine. Police said this is the first time they threatened a kid. I call my __ overseas. It was a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on 6'1" and totally would have protected us if he hadn't run off to his mistress when my son was 3 weeks old, and he says, "Why are you wasting time talking to the police? Our son needs to have dinner and go to bed." He didn't say thanks for protecting our son, or that sounds horrible. Are you okay? Fast forward a few months and I'm camping with my son on a Sunday night back home. The campground is emptied out and we're in the middle of a previously busy paddock far away from the 2 other groups. It's night time and the entrance gates have been locked for several hours, so day visitors should have left by now. Her car drives up the hill heading straight for us and then stops. 2 men are inside. One starts to get out of his car to come towards me, and as he does, he says in an eerily creepy similar manner, "Excuse me, I have a question." My alarm bells go off like crazy and I start screaming at them to off. He starts to protest, but I threaten to call the cops and they drive off. I call my dad crying and he says, "I hope your son doesn't learn that this is how you treat people when they want to speak to you." Try being a short petite woman, lone protector of a toddler, previously never scared of anything and now panics when people approach me camping alone in a paddock. I still don't know if I overreacted or if my senses protected me. Story 10. The other night I was heading home after a drink with some friends. My apartment is more or less a 15-minute walk from the subway station. I start walking and I notice a man walking a few feet behind me. I can hear him speaking, but his voice was very low, so I assumed he was on the phone, and trying to keep his conversation private, I keep on walking. After a few minutes, I realized that the man isn't on the phone. He's mumbling nonsense to himself, and I guess he got a bit closer because I can sort of hear him. I think he was saying things like, "I don't like the soft hands, dead birds rising." So yeah, that kind of creeped me out, so I decided to pick up the pace. I arrived at the street corner, turned right. The man still followed, still mumbling. Now I'm thinking that I'm just being paranoid and that we're just taking similar roads. We arrive at a park. I decide to walk through it. Again, the man follows behind me. Now I'm starting to freak out. There's a bunch of horror scenarios play out in my mind. I'm in a full-blown slash of play, and that guy is the killer who will keep up my pace no matter how fast I run by simply walking. After the park, I decide to actually test the guy, see if he's actually following me. I cross the street and I start walking the opposite way of where we were going. The slasher guy does the same. Now I know he's actually following me. I'm starting to evaluate my options. Do I call the cops? Do I just run for it? Do I confront him? I decide to run. We get to another corner and as soon as I turn, I blast into a sprint, and after a few seconds I notice a convenience store nearby. I look behind me. The guy still hasn't turned the corner. I enter the store and decide to wait. Eventually, I see the guy walking right past this door in past me. Luckily, he never looked inside because he would have spotted me for sure. After a few minutes go by, I leave the store, take a look around without saying, and I head home. I have no idea who this guy was or what he wanted, but this really freaked me out and I hope to God I never encounter him again. Music. Story 11. Yesterday my daughter and I went to one of those app-based games. It's like a scavenger hunt, but digital. We had to follow the map, it asks questions, and we had to solve riddles. Things like that. The theme is on one of our favorite books and movies. She and I went to the game with some of our friends and their kids about the same age. There were hundreds of people in costumes roaming around downtown trying to save the person in the game. My daughter has a very rare health issue. Everything was fine, and then she wasn't. We had to leave early before the game was done, so we start our walk back to our car that was in the parking garage. Ran by the city. We took our time. The elevator apparently was broken, so we had to walk up 3 floors. I tell my daughter we will take our time, and her equipment is in the core. As we're walking to the stairwell, a man follows us and the hair on my neck stands up. I get a chill, goosebumps all over. I carry pepper spray on my key ring. I tell my daughter to walk right in front of me and take her time. I unlock the trigger on the pepper spray. This man could have walked around us at any time. He didn't. He stayed right behind us. When we get to the 3rd level, I have my arm locked right around hers. Our car is the first one right there next to the stairwell. He follows us out at the door. I quickly unlock my car and pretty much toss her inside and close the door. I turn around to face you. He looks at me, doesn't say a word, and walks back into the stairwell. There was no one in the parking garage. All the employees had already left for the day. There were no cameras in this specific garage. If I would have known that, I would have picked a different one. Now, I even wonder if the elevator was really broken, because I don't remember seeing signs on the door when we got there. We didn't ride the elevator down because my daughter likes taking the stairs, but going down is way easier for her than going up. Story 12. Junior year of college, this random guy approached me and a friend working at booth at an activities fair and asked us to help get in contact with this buddy of his that he was supposed to go camping with. Mind you, this was winter in New Hampshire, so it was really underscore cold. It was already starting to sound sketchy. Not only was the guy not a student at my university, but he didn't even know the name of the guy he was supposed to go camping with. Nor did he know the phone number. He said something to the effect of, "Oh, I was supposed to pick him up this morning and give him and his girlfriend a ride to the campus, but she's not picking up her phone. Can you help me find them?" He kind of knew her name, kept saying it was something like Shannon, something like Bree. I was mad, creeped out, but pretended to help nonetheless, as my friend seemed okay. He tried guessing the name of this male friend, but all the information he really had was the girl's name. His main goal in all of it was to figure out where he could find these people. He said he was trying to get into a building where he thought they were, but he couldn't because it was locked. He even hinted that he was hoping one of us could help him get into the building, but we just shrugged it off with, "Oh, we wish we could help more, but we're stuck here until 2 p.m. After we failed to help him, we directed him towards the dining hall because we had no idea where else to send him, and he walked out of the building. My friend and I looked at each other and were both lying. Holy Did you get freaked out by him too? I firmly believe that he was an abusive or jealous ex trying to find out where his ex-girlfriend and new boyfriend were. I really try not to judge someone before I know them, but that was just something really not right with him. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. I'd like to thank my channel members and patrons for the support: Wendy, ADHD, Aurora, Brooks, Snowball, Ruthina, Janice, Des, Borderline, Betty, Crafty Cow, Tina, Dina, Vampy, Dabs, Patricia, Amber, Krista, Brenda, Absent, Alice, Pretty Girl, 215, Christy K, Spiders, Web, Ooh La La, Andrea, Lady, Drackard, Sue, Monique, Sean, Gorman, Stacy, Greg, Chelsea, Amanda, Jane, Samantha, Zepp, Sarah C, Casey, Linda, Austin, Tegan, Chris, and Donna, Aaron, Lil, Smart, Jenny, Gabrielle, Misanthropia, Ryan, Rudy, Christina, Della, Rosa News, 505, Jody, Sarah P, James, Gargano, Gemma, Alan, Monica, Level, Ace, Alex, and Courtney Maxwell. I will see you on the next one.